On this episode of the InsurTech Geek Podcast, we're talking about how technology helps drive better rehabilitation outcomes for injured workers with Greg Nichols from SPNet Clinical Solutions. The InsurTech Geek Podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. We'll be interviewing guests and doing deep dives into specific tech we see changing the industry. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out. This episode of the InsurTech Geek Podcast is here thanks to the support of JB Knowledge. JB Knowledge creates custom technology solutions for P&C insurance companies of all sizes. Learn more about our services at jbknowledge.com. And we are back with another great episode of the InsurTech Geek Podcast, always geeking out on insurance tech and insurance in general. With me, of course, I'm your host, James Benham, CEO of JB Knowledge, and Tara with me is the most interesting man in insurance. That's right, Mr. Rob Galbraith. What's going on down in San Antonio, buddy?
Hey, just enjoying this time of year. The weather's gorgeous down here. Not too hot, not too cold. So as it gets a little chilly, the leaves turn up north. We still getting some real nice temperatures, so you can be outside here.
Nice. So you're going to put some lederhosen on and go to Oktoberfest up in New Braunfels?
You know, it's funny. I'm not, but we just signed the permission slip for my daughter to her German class is going to go there. So, yeah, it should be a good time.
Tell you what, buddy, I was thinking about it because I went to Germany and Austria this summer, and I might have happened to get me a pair of lederhosen that I'm extremely excited about. They are genuine and authentic, along with the shirt. And I have the full get up. Like I have the full on get up. I got the whole get up, including the hat, the shoes, like all like handmade in Germany by real Germans. You know? Wow. So I'm just saying, I'm pretty excited about it. Oktoberfest.
Yeah, my wife is German, and she's from Berlin and later moved to Dresden. And so a lot of the lederhosen, the Oktoberfest, like, it's really more Bavarian, you know, kind of Munich and in around that area. So I was trying to explain to my daughter, because she's like, I said, your mom and I, we went like when we first started dating, but she never really wanted to go back. My daughter was trying to understand why. I was like, well, it's like being from Michigan and then moving to Texas. It's just a whole different side of the world, even though it's the same country.
Yeah. It's weird. I was in Munich, so, and definitely my travels in Germany have been in Bavaria. So they're definitely super into it. With us, a guy who would probably be right there in the lederhosen with me, because this man loves dressing up, having fun. He loves cutting loose. You never know what you're going to catch him in. This is my buddy Greg Nichols. What's up, Greg?
I'm still trying to get the visual out of my head. I mean, it's really disturbing. I mean, I'm really working on that visually to eliminate that, but no, thanks for having me. I'm super excited about being with the energy of this group. And but James, you got to let me get that out of my head so I can refocus on some of the talk here. So no,
I will be showing you a picture of
that.
No,
please, don't reinforce it. I need positive cognitive behavior, not negative cognitive behavior.
Not only are you not going to get the visual out of your head, you're not going to unburn it from your eye.
Oh my gosh!
Because I wore it all over Switzerland, and they're like, and everybody's like, "Oh, are you German?" I'm like, "Nope, from Texas." Like, why are you wearing the lederhosen? And I'm like, because when in Rome,
be like the Romans.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm just saying, man.
Hey, take your time. Take your time. You don't need to pull that up. Yeah. Okay, that's enough. The legs are not. You need. Hey, look. I got an exercise program for you. I know you got two bad heels. We'll make that look a lot better.
So, Greg, I want to talk about your background. I want to talk about your company. I want to talk about innovation. I want to talk about physical therapy. I want to talk about how critical rehabilitation and innovation and rehab is for outcomes of workers' comp injuries. Like, there's a lot of things I want to talk about. But before that, I want to talk about you. You're an Alabama guy. Now, you didn't go to University of Alabama, but you are an ardent supporter. And so we're just not going to talk about football. It's just not the year. It's a rebuilding year. Although, there are no rebuilding years anymore. They don't exist because of the transfer portal. There's no such thing as a rebuilding year. So I don't know what this kind of football is, but it's not Alabama football. But I'm sorry for your loss of your season. But maybe he'll beat. I think he'll beat Auburn, but you never know. So you went to University of South Alabama. You got a Bachelor of Science in Physical Therapy, and you also, interestingly, for being a PT, you played baseball for Jeff Davis Junior College in Mobile. And I'm a huge college baseball fan, like big time college baseball fan. Like I care 10 times more about college baseball and what goes on in Omaha than I do about the World Series. So did you decide on a career in PT from all the injuries you saw from people playing baseball? Like what was the origin story here?
So, it's interesting. Played a lot of ball. End up building a baseball academy to help at-risk youths get into college, and actually have one guy in the league right now that was MVP last year as a rookie in the league for Baltimore, which I was part of his journey, not the complete part, but anyway. But ironically, I got into PT because my brother, when he was 9, had a tumor in his spine at his T12, which pretty much paralyzed him from below. And so we went through 3 years of trying to figure out a diagnosis, to surgery, to he's going to die, to he's never going to walk, to all of a sudden he's playing ball again, right, within a 4-year period. So I watched my little brother go through, and my family go through the whole process of the low of lowest to the high of highest. And at the very end of the highest was a PT that told us it was going to be okay, that brought us through those dark moments. And so, you've been given certain gifts, and, maybe my gift is to help people through tough times. And so I started treating, and I knew what I wanted to do before I got into high school. So kind of rare, you don't really have that path laid out. And my first job was, I drove an hour and a half to work 3 days a week in Birmingham at UAB in probably the worst environment in PT, which is the burn unit. So, yeah. So it's kind of a crazy story. And, I can't be more blessed to be given the skills I've had. And then all of a sudden I got into spreadsheets. So I don't know what the hell happened along the way. But, so I kind of come from the bottom up in the ecosystem when you think about it.
But what a great origin, like what a great reason for doing this. And I find the human, I've been podcasting for this podcast about 5 years now, if you can believe that. And then before that, another several years. And I've gotten to interview hundreds of people. And the human experience is the most interesting topic of all our conversations. Like what drives people to do things, what motivates them, how they redirect an entire lifetime based on something that happens to them. I mean, you might have ended up being an attorney, or you might have ended up being an engineer. You might have ended up being a lot of things, except this horrible thing happened, and you saw the power of physical medicine. And you're like, yeah, I want to give my life to that. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. My first patient as a student, which, you're on this euphoria, you're about to graduate, you're trying to get a license and stuff. She was 29 years old. She had a 3-year-old son named Zach, and I'd become very close with her. And she had something called myasthenia gravis, which is a demyelinarization of some tissue in the brain and nervous system. And I remember just going, this is awesome. And the last day I had her, she threw a clot and died. So then I'm like, is this really for me? Do I really want to be in medicine because I've spent this enormous time? But then I just was like, how do I create walls within my own emotions to go out and deal with death every day? Because I was in an acute care. I grew up in the hospital. I mean, I was the best butt wiper. That's how I got through college. I went to school at night, wiped butts in the day, and did everything I could to grind away. And when you think about medicine, it's very expensive. So you deal with a lot of money. You deal with life or death. I mean, those are the two most intense things that you have to deal with. And I try to teach some of these younger people that, I see the money in medicine. There's no real money in medicine, guys. It's just a service that everybody should have an access to. And so it's just, I don't know. It's been an interesting journey for me. Have no idea how it ended up on the Insurance Geek podcast, right? So how am I even here when I was treating patients, So,
where was the pivot then? Because you were in physical medicine, you were a staff PT doing rehab work. Then you were a manager PT at a regional medical center, and then you co-founded PT Plus and did that get acquired by hospital, by HCA?
It was a JV that I did with HCA back in the day. Columbia was what it was before. And that's when the pivot happened, is that the hospital said, there's something about you. We're going to get rid of a CEO, which in a small hospital settings, you typically turn your CEO every 18 months just because you're dealing with such a small group of very powerful physicians that control, your ecosystem. And they said, hey, we want you to lead us and still treat like it was we were running an $800 million operation. And so I became COO and still ran the clinics. And that was my pivot into corporate medicine. I just fell in love with corporate style systems. And, I've worked for ACA, which was the biggest hospital company in the world at that time. Happened to get investigated, had a little issue with some of the politics. Then all of a sudden I jumped on to HealthSouth a week after they indicted their CEO, who happened to be from where I was from, and was part of a team with some of the Marsh guys to rebuild it. And then that's when I got in product design. So the pivot happened somewhere in there when I started enjoying boardroom meetings and understood that I could build products that could impact greater populations than just what I did in my clinics. So, but that's the comp side came in because the clinics I took over from HealthSouth, we had this new car company called Hyundai that came to America. And I did some back end, we were using Six Sigma analysis back then, but I did some back end data drives and really started trying to understand in 2007 how data could be used to help the general population, whether it's comp, whether it's commercial, whatever. So, and then how does it bridge to what I actually do in the clinic? Because that's the gap right now, right? So
when was the last time you saw a patient yourself?
I still work with some pro athletes that'll come back in the off season that want to be tuned, because I had a great exposure for some guys up at HealthSouth that were on Andrews' team back in the day of, what's the thing we do? So I'm a big baseball guy. Again, I owned a baseball academy, and I'd bring these guys in and tune them. And then my youngest daughter is a big time gymnast. And so I kind of work with them. And, but I haven't been inside of a clinic. I did renew my license this year, just because I'll never want to give up on it, but I haven't been inside a clinic in 6 or 8 years.
Where does your, is this, who's your daughter? What's her name?
So my baby girl's name is Ava. She's 13. My oldest one is 28, and it's still the same wife. So, and I travel a lot, so I'm still trying to figure out how that works.
Are both of them gymnastics?
So the oldest one now has a child, and she is out obviously, and she lives in the Southeast. And my youngest one is a gymnast, and then my middle one plays college baseball. So he's playing college baseball still.
Wow,
that's my son. Yeah, that's my son.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, that's awesome. So 2 gymnasts and a baseball player, as the children of a PT. I love that.
Yeah. It's I don't know. I keep asking myself why, but whatever. I think it's their mother. Their mother's the driving force. So I just say yes, ma'am, and keep going. So no,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So once you started into the clinic, then you got into physical therapy for injured workers, and that's where you had the connection with work comp. So it's really like the last 20 plus years. If you actually wind all the way back, you're really back to like 27, 28 years. We love talking about technology and innovation. When did you start noticing a real connection with technology and how it could be used and assisted to drive results? Because you and I have worked together on some really neat projects, and one in particular that's really fascinating, and And so I was just curious, like where your love and affinity for technology came from.
So the original exposure was studying reserves and, history of claims with the car industry. And can I convert the data point to something I can see clinically? Because in my space, medicine is really, I don't know, people talk about medicine as a whole. In my space, medicine is not a science, it's an art. Like what I feel with my hands are different from what someone else will feel. And your pain levels between you and Rob could be extremely different. I'm sure you're kind of weak-minded. So, James got low level pain. Rob's got high level pain, thresholds, right? So no, it's tying data, which is consistently available in our system, back to something in the clinic that I could do something with. So ironically, in a car industry, 78% of your claims calls happen between your shoulder and your fingertips. Well, let's eliminate one of those joints from being injured, and we can have a tremendous impact on cost, right? So that was the first thing we did. Is I worked with some companies and built some models on how to screen incoming employees to be optimal, game day players. And so we set reserves, and we never touched, for the first 5 years, we were under like 15, 20% of the reserves ever set by doing this. That led me to product design that now has us where even you and I and our companies are working together on some, what I think is next generational evolution of how we manage think about the injured worker as a life cycle. The injury is the beginning of the life, returning to work's the end of the life. How does technology change the experience of that life cycle, whether it be injured worker, whether it be claims professional, whether it be a payer? That payer could be an employer, carrier, TPA, whatever. But how do we change their experience to shorten that life cycle? That's the only two things we're here to do. Take someone who's hurt, afraid, and isolated, get them back to work, and do it at the most cost-effective method. That's it. There is no other goals in our system except take someone who's hurt and do it at the lowest cost. That's the most efficient way to do it. So once you make your goals really simple, getting there seems to be, technology, in my opinion, is going to be one of the key drivers going forward.
I noticed you said hurt, afraid, and isolated. You're adding in there's some mental combinations of this, in particular in workers' comp. We talk a lot about return to work, and we talk a lot about it. We talk a lot about getting the worker back, because there's a huge psychological impact on being injured in general, but then being injured to the point where you can't work can be really negative, really detrimental. And so your physical therapy, you guys are the front line. Aren't you having the most contact with injured workers as a general rule of thumb?
I will spend the most time face to face with the injured worker. I will, and if you think musculoskeletal, which is about 80+% of all injuries associated with work, you've got a large percentage of those going into physical medicine. So I'm spending the most time with that population of patients. And this is where I just get frustrated in my ecosystem, is that everyone at the executive level has been making these decisions, has never held a guy's hand who's 6'4" logger, who's got 4 kids, and he's crying because he's blown his back out, and he knows he doesn't have an education to go get a desk job, and he's not going to be able to take care of his family. And he's sitting there crying in front of you as a therapist. My job is to remove barriers and get him back to work. So as we make decisions in these boardrooms about how we adjudicate claims and shave time and do this, there's still a human being to this that has to be the center of our world. And again, that's where you did a nice review a couple of weeks ago with a guy that has affected me as he's affected you. And I think that when you have the balance of how much is too much on technology versus leaving the human in, that's what we're still all trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure it out. And it's got to be figured out by each of our domain expertise. I'm a domain expert in just physical medicine. Who's the domain of claims? Who's the domain of the physician point of entry intake? So that's the exciting part, is bringing our domain expertise to it. So that I don't know. I get on a diatribe about the human being because I grew up in the early 2000s when the world said, hey, the most important thing in healthcare is the patient. So now all of a sudden you had patient-reported outcomes being driven. This was an early legislation in 2000 that was talking about a pay-for-performance model, and the patient dictated how you perform, which I think about that, not your cost, So I'm a huge advocate of patient claimant experience.
Awesome. Rob, your question.
Yeah, Greg. So I love the fact that we have you on the show, because so many of the folks that we do have either come from the insurance industry itself, or come from, technology, startup, et cetera. I don't know that we've had a lot of providers, if any, on the InsurTech Geek podcast before. So I'm curious, your relationship with some of the carrier partners, what you've seen from somebody that certainly works alongside the insurance industry, but I don't consider part of, right? Because you've got your own domain expertise, as you just mentioned. So maybe you can just talk about the evolution of insurance carriers, providers, your experience as somebody that's looking to innovate in your space. How receptive have they been? How easy to work with? And has that changed over time? Or are there still some elements where you think there's opportunity?
Well, there's always opportunity. I mean, you're on an advisory board for a group that does nothing but educate about our space, right? Really curious as I research them. I'm looking for clinical influences from their side to train our counterparts, right? How do they marry that? So, and again, I think it's interesting. So in my world, the way I think about it is there's three participants in the ecosystem. There's obviously the claimant. There's the claim professional who's trying to support the claimant. And then there's someone that pays the bills. That's it. There's three. You've got the provider in the claimant world. So claimant adjuster and provider are trying to support the claimant. We think, and what we are seeing is that, and we've had some very influential industry leaders give ideas about how we can all get better to service the claimant. The claimant in our world's a patient. I'm not a big fan of claimant. I like the word patient, but we've seen whether they're TPAs or carriers or providers, all try to get to the table to be part of the solution. In the past, you had bridges that didn't connect the provider world to the payer world, right? Or from the payer world to the employer world. So these bridges didn't exist, and they didn't exist because in each of those domains, you had different language that wouldn't translate. Well, ironically, the data in workers' comp is enormous. One of our mentors talks about it. The data that we have between the two domains or the three domains is enormous. We just didn't share it across the bridge, right? So now if people are more open to sharing their domain expertise and translating that data in a way that I can ingest it as a provider and do something with it, that's really powerful. That's extremely powerful. Claims are down across the country. People are working safer, but the claims that I'm seeing have a much higher acuity value, much higher. That means that I got an aging workforce. That tweaked knee on a 60-year-old is different than a tweaked knee on a 25-year-old, right? The comorbidities as you age compound the recovery process. But I might not have the comorbidities as a provider when you walk in my clinic, but the adjuster does. So to bridge that over in a way, doesn't have to be a list of them. It just has to be, I'm worried about this claim because of some factor. And as a provider, I want you to be aware of it. And provider needs to reverse engineer that back. So if we all work together, pulling a vehicle one way instead of out from each other, then I think we're going to get the recovery cycle to be much shorter in time, right? So if that all of a sudden becomes our ultimate goal as an ecosystem, and we all agree that we're going to share information, then I'm seeing it at the TPA level, the biggest TPAs in the country. I'm seeing it at the biggest carriers in the country. I'm seeing the largest provider who I came from, some of the largest providers in the country going, can I have a place at the table to where I can understand the problem better? That's very exciting to me. And then you validate it with data. You have to validate everything with data. Not, it feels good. Great. I mean, that's great. But I need it in data so I can meet the outcome of financial fiduciary responsibility as well as life cycle impact. So I'm round robin, the way I responded. But if does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And I think to your point, the big communication challenges before, right, where everyone had their own language for things. And I know that's a big thing that I work with clients on, is just trying to understand that translation, right, of kind of, what does frequency mean? What does severity mean? What metrics are you measured on in your world, honestly, is kind of a lot of it. And then, okay, let's see how that translates and see where there's overlap and where there's potential synergies. And I think that bridge, it sounds like, is the data itself, right? So now, before it was like right, the feeling the elephant from different sides and try to describe it when you're blindfolded. Right now, it's like, okay, we have a common language in some senses is the data, and it may mean different things, or how we interpret it may be different, but at least we have a core thing now that, right, is talking about patients directly tied to what their experience and their outcomes, et cetera, that then we can now try to interpret and share and be that lingua franca, right, that common language among all the parties. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Where I like to hear James talk a lot about is we all have our own description of data and how we use it. But what really fascinates me about listening to your podcast and how people approach this is, how does the technology help you use the data more efficiently, right? So how does technology give me an insight quicker that I can react to that change in the data? And we, as a company, really, 3 years ago, we had a CEO that came in who is data driven. He has a background, higher level education in statistics and economics and stuff. And he came in and he absorbed as much clinical that we could push in front of him. And then he formulated this idea of, no one's ever tried to use data to support an output in our world that gives us an action item. It's all been rate, it's all about your rate. And that's such a small part of the experience of all the stakeholders. And so we've invested substantial dollars in getting larger data and again, protecting that data. It's specific data to a client that we can't just, it's open. But we can use some of the line level type of details to better understand how something's going to turn out, right? And so it's very fascinating. And the way I always talk about this is, I've been traveling for 20 years discussing these things. And, I used to print maps off. Now I know through a website that my direction of going to my target is on track. I know what time I'm going to get there. And oh, by the way, I'm going to alternate you around. So think about the life cycle. It's a trip from point A to point B. If I could tell you that point A, your first step on your life cycle will get you to the end of your life cycle quicker. And then if I could tell you the combination of that doctor, this therapist, this hospital got you to your point of end quicker by using data, why don't I just create a Google Maps or an Apple Maps program for a real life cycle? Right? So our data lake now is tremendous, and we have tremendous medical insights on what's out there. And we talk about this all the time. This AI, this new technology and comp is a race. If you're just now starting the race, the marathon's almost over. I mean, it's you needed to be in this race years ago. And so we assimilated a team that's been looking at it this way for the last 8 years. And we're really, really excited about what we think we can do with having conversations, to your point, with other stakeholders who are thinking about the life cycle differently. So I don't know. I go off on I get so excited about this stuff, but
yeah, well, y'all are pulling together something unique, and I want to have my final closing question around this. SPNet is part of MedRisk. MedRisk is a multi-billion-dollar company now, if I'm correct. You guys just acquired the preeminent bill review software and services company in the country, correct? So it was part of Conduit, and it's called Stratacare, and so now Stratacare is part of MedRisk. So now you're combining all of the medical bills and bill review with the largest physical medicine network in the country. So the largest physical medicine network in the country with the largest medical bill review provider in the country. That's about more than just aggregating revenue. That's one of the biggest data repositories in the country that allows you to, again, drive better outcomes, right?
Yeah, if it's used with some discipline, and we continue to use it to evaluate the life cycle, we're in a great position to rethink about how we provide insights, how we guide the recovery process, and we're beyond excited about our board saw the vision and gave us the opportunity to go make the investment. And we're really, really excited about what we can do with this to help people make these decisions. Ultimately, it's the client's decision, right? It's the claimant's decision. But it's just like, again, I go back to following a dynamic map on a road trip. You can choose to go the shorter route or you can stay on the long one. But the option is you have a choice. And, we are very excited about what we can do with this. We've been studying it in our domain in the physical medicine space for years. And we tapped into a way to give those options to our clients. And some of the largest carriers have said, look, you know better the choice than why are we making this choice? Why aren't you making this choice based on your data? So we're really excited about where we think we can go with it. And then we've got partners at all levels in the ecosystem that are now walking with us on the journey. So it's okay. It's not okay if one of us decides to jump forward and everybody else stays back. We have to, as an industry, start to move our way forward to change the experience of the injured worker, the desk level, and the payer and the provider. So I find it's going to be a very fascinating next 18 to 24 months. And you'll see some things from us that we're really, really excited about.
Yeah, as you should be. When you strategically acquire a group of companies that are highly complementary, it becomes much more. The whole of that company becomes much more than the sum of the parts. It's much more than just summing up revenue. It's about being able to provide insights for injured workers and the employers that haven't been driven before. I mean, it's plain and simple. So I'm excited about what y'all have going on there. Certainly, I love working with you. Y'all have been a foundational member of our Terra Connect initiative to securely electronically connect workers' compensation adjusters with the medical providers so that we can exchange data in a secure environment, obviously place the orders so they're not they don't have to email things, they don't have to log into portals. It can all just be seamless. And so I appreciate all of your brains and your effort on that, but also I love what y'all have going on with bringing bill review into this country's largest physical medicine network. But the thing I like about you most is that you actually still work with patients. You still care about the heart of what brought you into this industry in the first place, and that's healing people. I had, just to close out with, I had a wonderful, wonderful physical therapy experience. A guy named Michael Perkins here in College Station. He heals people. He's a healer, and he sat down with me. He took time to get to understand me and my injury. He got to know me as a person. And he brought me back from 2 ankle surgeries and a spine surgery that were pretty serious for me. And mentally, I went through that trough of all those feelings you talked about. And so when you said that, it brought me back to that place I was at when I couldn't move, I couldn't walk, couldn't sit for a while. That was really painful, And so I really appreciate that you're at the heart, you're a healer, that you love people. And I appreciate that you're in this industry. So thanks for taking the time to come on the show, brother.
No, man, brother. I really appreciate you. Hey, I got one other thing I was going to share with you because I'm a loyal listener and stuff. And so you talk about one of our mentors and you have this, us thinking about this guy all the time. So I was going to give you my little thing is that every 6 months he was your second participant on your original show. And then he just did one 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I know he's going to watch, so I'm just going to show him something because he's unbelievably powerful and he keeps me in the right mindset, but you got to think about what he's going through. So every 6 months, just so you know, James, he and I take this little glass, we fill it with some type of wine, and we drink and celebrate 6 months. And you'll know what I mean by that. But I keep it on my desk to remind me why I'm here, what I do, and how much I love this industry and what it does for people who are really hurt and afraid. And if you don't think about someone we always think about the injury, and you just talked about your recovery. You never described one time anything clinical to me. You talked about how he knew you, how he knew what kind of person you were. You even in that little snippet, you never said a word about the type of injury. You talked about what he did for you emotionally. And so that's where the passion's got to come from. These are people. Some of them try to take advantage of the system. I get it, right? Such a small percentage, but these are people that are trying to navigate a system that has 51 different ways of doing things because it's in every state different. It's kind of crazy, but no, I appreciate what you're doing. The more we can bring awareness to what our little ecosystem's like and challenge people to think outside of it differently, it's crazy. So
It is. And we're talking, he's given me permission to disclose that. We're talking about Skip Brechtel, of course. He and I shared a stage at National Comp, and cancer. He's a cancer survivor. He gave me permission to talk about that on the show. And, just an amazing guy.
He left your stage and came to mine the next day. So
yes, he did. Yes, he did. And we love him, and he's a great guy.
Yeah.
And, it's awesome. Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. I appreciate that. I love that tradition.
Absolutely.
And Rob, as always, thank you for co-hosting.
Absolutely. Pleasure
to meet you. Yep.
Great to have you on, Greg.
And to all of our listeners out there, again, my name is James Benham. I'm your InsurTech Geek. This has been the InsurTech Geek Podcast. Enjoy the ride and geek out. See you next time. The InsurTech Geek Podcast is all about technology that's transforming and disrupting the insurance world. I've been your host, James Benham. That's jamesbenham.com, with co-host Rob Galbraith at endofinsurance.com. We're taking you on a journey through insurance tech, so enjoy the ride and geek out.